Ainge has put the Celtics in a very tough position going into the next season. Per usual, there were very high expectations from Celtics fans and fans across the league for the Celtics going into this offseason. The Celtics are always a name that comes up when talking about free agent destinations or potentially trading for stars. After all, Danny Ainge assembled so many assets, including draft picks, it's kind of hard to count them out when considering trading for a star. However, year in and year out, Danny Ainge has failed to do anything with these assets. Now sure, the Celtics have been unlucky in some aspects, such as Kyrie Irving not gelling in Boston the way he was expected to, or injuries to Gordon Hayward year in and year out that seem to crush any expectations that they had. I feel like it's time to finally put some of the blame on Danny Ainge and on this Celtics front office. Because year in and year out, we come into the offseason with a plan, with expectations, with so many possibilities, and year in and year out, we leave the offseason with the exact same roster that we had the year before. And sadly to no one's surprise, it's happened again. Once the Celtics were eliminated by the Miami Heat in 6 games in the Eastern Conference Finals, we looked towards the offseason with a few certain pieces that we wanted to add or things that we wanted to fix in the team. One of the main issues was a lack of a bench and also a lack of a solidified big who could guard bigs like Bam Adebayo or Anthony Davis in the finals, should we have gone to the finals. Kemba Walker also struggled in the playoffs, but I feel like that's something that will get better as time goes on and he gets more experience in meaningful playoff games. But regardless, there were clear issues that needed to be fixed in this offseason, and Danny Ainge has not fixed any of them. Probably the biggest issue that we looked to fix in this offseason was our lack of a big. Daniel Theis is a perfectly fine backup big. However, that is all he is. I do not see him being a formidable starter in this league, especially on the defensive end. He's not able to match up against Bam Adebayo or against Anthony Davis. And in fact, Grant Williams, who is 6'6", seemed to have more success against Bam in the playoffs than Daniel Theis did. So the Celtics explored many possibilities for bigs to acquire in this offseason, including Andre Drummond, Rudy Gobert, possibly trading for Miles Turner, Harry Giles, or possibly trading up in the draft for Onyeka Okongwu or James Wiseman. These were all possibilities that were considered, however, I'd say the two that were most likely were going for Miles Turner or trading up in the draft. And to pull either of these moves off, we'd most likely have to include Gordon Hayward in a trade or a sign and trade. So this past Tuesday rolled around and it was supposed to be the deadline to make a decision on your player option, but Danny Ainge and Gordon Hayward had been working together to try to find a solution to get him to a destination he wanted to be and to get the Celtics some assets in return, as it was clear that the two sides did not work out as well as they wanted to and it was time to move on. However, they were unable to come to any sort of agreements by Tuesday, so they extended that deadline to Thursday to try to give them more time to explore opportunities to find a good landing spot for Gordon Hayward. Now, we move into Wednesday, and we move into the NBA draft. Now, the past few years, while he has selected Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, Ainge has received some criticism for his draft picks, as he tends to draft a lot of quote-unquote project players instead of win-now pieces when we are a win-now team. Another issue with recent drafts is Ainge's tendency to bring in 3 or 4 rookies every single year when it's quite clear that they are not going to get the playtime that they need in their rookie season or anytime soon. Recent examples include 2018 big man Robert Williams, who has been on the bench most of his career despite showing great promise when he has been on the floor. Brad Stevens simply does not give him the minutes, as he is focusing on winning now rather than player development, and that creates an issue when you're drafting for player development, but you're trying to win now. In our 2019 draft, we also selected Romeo Langford, Grant Williams, and Carson Edwards, and among the 3 of them, only Grant Williams saw significant minutes, and that was really only in the playoffs. So for most of the season, we used 3 draft picks and didn't really use any of them wisely. Because of this, it was thought there is no way that the Celtics are going to keep all 3 of their first round picks that they have going into this draft. And technically we didn't. We gave one of them away for nothing. We were all hoping that we would be able to trade up to potentially number 5 or number 6 for Wiseman or Okongwu, but that obviously did not happen. So once the 6th pick passed and Okongwu went to Atlanta, we began to look to our 14th pick for options that we may get there. And I have to say, while I would have preferred to trade the pick to move up in the draft, I am very happy with the selection that we made at number 14. Aaron Nesmith is arguably the best shooter in the draft, and he'll fit perfectly on our bench in a position where we didn't really have a lot of options on the bench, even though we had 3 small forwards on the roster with Jalen, Jason, and Gordon Hayward. All 3 of them started, so we didn't really have a bench small forward. So at 14, we are drafting for a need. We need shooting off the bench, and we need a small forward off the bench, and he checks both of those boxes. However, we then move towards the back end of our draft, and that's where I begin to have an issue. Seeing how Carson Edwards worked out last year, you would think Danny Ainge would have learned his lesson about drafting older, shooting, score first point guards in the late first round and early second round. However, he made the exact same mistake again. Now, I'm not going to say Peyton Pritchard has no potential and no place on this team, but personally, I am not a big fan of the pick, as he just reminds me too much of Carson Edwards. I am especially not a fan of the pick when you look at the fact that we have drafted 4 point guards in the last 2 drafts, and it doesn't seem as though any of them are getting significant playing time anytime soon. I would have preferred to package these picks to move up in the draft, or trade for a veteran who can help us win now. So, you'd think when I found out that we traded the 30th pick, I would have been pretty happy. However, we traded the pick for basically nothing. In a deal with the Memphis Grizzlies, which later went on to include sending Enes Kanter to the Portland Trail Blazers, we sent the 30th pick, which ended up being Desmond Bane, to the Grizzlies in exchange for nobody really knew what. It was very unclear what we were going to get from that trade, and ultimately it ended up being a conditional future second round pick, which to me means we didn't really know who we wanted here, we didn't really need another rookie, so we just gave the pick away. And then at 47, we selected a point guard from Israel who will not play for us in the following season. He is a draft and stash who will come over at some point. I do not know anything about him, so I'm not going to make any judgment on that pick other than the fact that he is yet another point guard. So the draft came and went. We had a similar draft to what we have had in recent years, and the trade market sort of began to die down in every aspect except one. Andre Drummond didn't seem like a possibility anymore. Rudy Gobert did not seem like a possibility anymore. Whatever chance we had at possibly getting James Harden was out of the window, and we were left with Miles Turner. So going into Friday, the expectation was that Danny Ainge would find a way to get Gordon Hayward to the Pacers in exchange for Miles Turner and a couple other pieces. And this became closer to reality as Mark Stein of ESPN reported that Gordon Hayward wanted to go back home to Indiana, where they were potentially offering him a 4-year, $100 million contract. So everything was going well. It seemed like we were going to get Miles Turner and maybe Doug McDermott or Aaron Holiday, maybe a pick, in exchange for signing and trading Gordon Hayward. But then Danny Ainge tried to treat the Pacers as if they were the Nets. And what I mean by that is Danny Ainge got greedy. He got very greedy, and he blew the entire deal to try to get extra. While any reasonable fan would have been happy with Turner and even just McDermott, although preferably having Aaron Holiday involved too, the two sides were at an impasse. Indiana was offering Turner and McDermott, but the Celtics wanted Miles Turner and either Warren or Oladipo, and it stayed like that throughout the rest of the night. Unfortunately, while Ainge played the long game, waiting for Indiana to eventually give in and overpay for Hayward, Hayward explored other opportunities, as any player should. And ultimately, one of those opportunities was with the Charlotte Hornets, where they offered him a massive overpay of a 4-year, $120 million contract, coming off of an injury where he has shown no signs of stability. And if you're Gordon Hayward, it's kind of hard to pass that up. So earlier this morning, Woj reported that Gordon Hayward would be going to the Hornets, and the Celtics would be left with absolutely nothing. So where do we go from here? We've now lost all possibilities that we had going into the offseason. You're clearly not getting Harden. You're not going to be able to trade up in the draft anymore, as the draft already happened and you did the exact same thing you've done in past years. Miles Turner is off the board because you have no realistic way of trading for him. The possibility of Jrue Holiday is gone, as he's off to Milwaukee, another Eastern Conference contender. And really just any possibilities that you saw going into this offseason are now gone. And the Celtics, once again, are left in a position where they're gonna rely on a lot of second or third year players, or even a lot of rookies, to step up in big minutes and to play in the playoffs where they are not ready. So once again, the Celtics have gone into the offseason with very high expectations, and they have left the offseason with a pretty similar roster, if not arguably worse this time than what they had before. But somehow, some way, Celtics fans have convinced themselves once again that it is not Danny Ainge, their Lord and Savior's fault. Ainge couldn't have possibly known what Charlotte is offering Hayward, and it's really not his fault that he let him leave. Now granted, Charlotte did overpay for Hayward, and Ainge can't really control that. That's the sort of thing you're supposed to be looking at when you're working with Hayward to make a decision on the player option. You're supposed to be exploring the market to see what he might be worth and to try to organize a deal to avoid having him leave for nothing. But that's exactly what happened. You got greedy and he left you for nothing. You had a deal in place for months basically, and you sat there doing nothing, playing the waiting game, while Hayward went off and secured a bag. The deal was in place. All you had to do was say yes. You could have just said yes to Indiana and avoided this entire situation. You could have had Miles Turner in your hands before Charlotte ever even entered the picture. But you took too long and you allowed other opportunities to open up. You sat there playing the waiting game, doing nothing, and that is what ultimately led to the downfall of this situation. Now, it has recently come out that the Celtics will sign Tristan Thompson to replace what could have been Miles Turner, which is alright, I guess. I mean, I guess it's better than nothing, but he's not exactly great on the defensive side of the ball either. He's not a floor spacer like Miles Turner is. He's honestly not much better than what we already had. I just don't see how that's going to fix any of the issues we had last year, or take any steps to put us above any of the other teams in the Eastern Conference. That's the big issue here. While we do have a good core in place, other teams continue to improve, while the Celtics sit still and let other teams jump ahead of them. All of the other Eastern Conference contenders have been very active in the last couple of seasons. Last season, it was Philly acquiring Tobias Harris, getting Josh Richardson back in a sign and trade for Jimmy Butler, and now this offseason, they've gone for Seth Curry and more shooters to try to better fit Simmons and Embiid. The Milwaukee Bucks are always improving year in and year out. They traded for Bledsoe when he didn't want to be here, and now they've flipped Bledsoe for Jrue Holiday. Granted, they gave up a lot of picks to make this work, but still, they're improving. That's my main point. They are getting better, and they are trying to outwork their opponents to bring themselves up in the standings and give themselves a better chance of getting to the finals. The Raptors improved so much that they won a championship. And you know how they did it? They traded their franchise player DeMar DeRozan for Kawhi Leonard, somebody that you could have had, Danny Ainge, and you let the opportunity pass. So going into next season, I honestly just see a repeat of this season. Tatum will probably improve some more, Jalen will probably improve some more, and we'll run it back and probably be a second round exit or a conference finals exit once again, like we have been for the past 5 years. And unless somebody takes a massive leap that I don't see coming, or unless Danny Ainge makes some move mid-season, we're really kind of stuck in place, and going into the future beyond just next season, we're still stuck in place, as we have Kemba Walker on the books, we have Jaylen Brown's extension kicking in, we have Jason Tatum getting an extension in the near future, And we're really limited in terms of free agent signings that we can make or trades that will be available to us. So really what we're doing here is we are asking Tatum and Brown to carry our franchise to make up for the fact that Danny Ainge could not get them as good of a supporting cast as he could have, or as good of a supporting cast as they need to compete with the other teams in the Eastern Conference. And the sad reality is, this could be the case for the next 5 years. I hope I'm wrong. I was very optimistic just 12 hours ago, but at this point in time, it seems like the Celtics are pretty much stuck in place for the foreseeable future. This was your opportunity to make a move that, while it's not trading for James Harden, it is a move that is going to fix the weaknesses in this team, and it is going to put you in a position where you can maybe not compete for a championship right away, but you can make a run in the Eastern Conference to potentially get to the finals, or possibly win the championship if you get lucky. That would have set us on the path to maybe 2 or 3 years down the line, be serious contenders once Tatum and Brown start to enter their primes, and the overall team improves to the point where we're one of the best teams in the league. But I fear that with the lack of moves that has been made here, we're not going to have that ability to improve year in and year out. And I fear that we're going to be one of those teams that's good, but never good enough. And I fear that we're going to waste our time with Tatum and Brown, and eventually we're going to have to ship them off for draft picks, or they're just going to leave us with nothing, like Gordon Hayward just did, like Al Horford did, and like Kyrie Irving did. So no, I do not want to fire Danny Ainge, but I do feel like it's time we start putting some of the blame on him. We always come in with very high expectations, and we are almost always let down. But we always find some sort of excuse for Danny Ainge. We are never willing to place any of the blame on the man who put us in this position in the first place. But he is far from perfect, and I think it's time that we recognize that. So I am still hopeful going into the future. We have a very solid foundation of Tatum and Brown, as well as Kemba Walker and Marcus Smart. But I'm a little bit concerned with just how good this roster is. I don't think we're going to be competing for a championship this year, and I don't see a whole lot of options for next offseason. So I'm really kind of lost on the direction of the team at this point. But as much as I've just criticized him, Ainge knows far more about basketball than I do, and I am hopeful that he will find a way to get us out of this situation and bring us to banner 18. That is all. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.